1991. The Genesis is still fairly new and it's time to introduce a new beat-em-up. Something of a mix between the campy, gritty 80s cop movies and Double Dragon, Streets of Rage was Sega's other huge beat-em-up for the system alongside Golden Axe and would prove to be very successful. The game centers on Axel Stone, Adam Hunter, and Blaze Fielding, former cops who are out to get street justice on the criminal mastermind Mr. X, who has bought out the whole city including the police force, Sans themselves, and this dude with the rocket launcher. Originally an arcade game, it's far better known as a Genesis game. Streets of Rage is excessively available. Game Gear and Master System both have conversions that highly strip the game back, neither of which I'll be touching here. While the Genesis version has seen re-releases on the Wii Virtual Console, iOS, PC, on various compilations on the Genesis itself, Mega Games 2, Sega Classics Arcade Collection on the Sega CD 6-pack, as well as later releases, Sonic Gems Collection in Japan only, Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection on Xbox 360 and PS3, Sega Vintage Collection, Streets of Rage on Xbox 360's arcade service, on Steam both standalone and as part of Sega Mega Drive Classics Pack 4. For the 3DS with added 3D effects as Streets of Rage 3D standalone, as well as in the Japanese exclusive Sega 3D Fukkoku Archives, and Sega Genesis Classics for Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, plus assuredly tons of plug-and-play consoles, as well as a Japanese-only mobile remake, Bare Knuckle Mobile, Bare Knuckle being the much less cool Japanese name for the series. Basically, it's a typical Genesis game. It's available everywhere. It's fondly remembered, primarily because it's available everywhere. Genesis does what no one else will bother to do. Streets of Rage is the most basic of beat-em-ups. No frills, just punches. Each character has roughly the same moveset but with different attributes. A basic combo, a grapple they can use by walking into enemies, which can be followed into throws or punches, a jumping kick, a special move that they get by pressing jump and kick simultaneously, all of which are backward strikes at enemies approaching from behind, and a super, which each character can use once per life. For all three characters, it's just a screen nuke where this guy with a rocket launcher comes in and fucks up bosses and enemies alike. Each character is slightly different. Axel's the bad one, he sucks and has no range, and like most cops, he loves beating up women and minorities. Adam is the fast one, he's pretty okay, and like most cops, he loves beating up women and minorities. And Blaze is the hot and useful one. Her attacks generally have great range and come out really quickly, plus she loves beating up women. While the movesets aren't terrible, they do feel limited. Later games in the franchise would give a lot more options, but here the focus is mostly on spacing and timing. I think more than anything what's missing is a faster way to walk around. The dash button would really help with dodging or positioning, especially as there's no block button. Sometimes it feels like you're crawling while fighting enemies. One of the other more glaring things is the relative lack of enemy variety. You've got the regular guys who come in a few variants with more and more health, true for all the enemies, the Ninja Turtles who can grapple and slide, the Dominatrix hookers who hit you with whips, typical cop shit. The jugglers who toss things, and the karate guys who, they kinda also just punch you. They like jump around a little, I guess. All of these enemies are introduced slowly, but as the game progresses, they're basically thrown at you in endless succession, and that's really the structure of the game as it is with all beat-em-ups. Beat a bunch of women, walk forward, beat some more women, walk forward, fight a boss. It's not remotely bad, it's the standard of the genre, but it's also not incredibly my style. It lacks complexity and variety, quickly devolving into fuck you territory of here's every enemy in the game at once, good luck. Items can help crutch it out. There's a few weapons like knives and pipes, which deal more damage and have higher range than typical punches, but are lost after a few uses or when dropped enough times, which happens when hit with any attack, which kinda makes them situational at best, while healing items, extra lives, and super refills do basically what you'd expect. It's pretty clear that the game is balanced around multiplayer, which is a huge selling point, especially as the characters have team attacks and can cover each other's weaknesses. Cool hypothetically, but if you're playing the game alone, it makes it a lot more difficult. The game is very fun when played with multiple people. I've played it in the past with Rob as well as my brother as kids. It definitely helps a lot, but playing a game with people will always make it better. This one actually does have mechanics that make it better beyond just being around people you like. I feel that the game is owed some credit in two major areas, that being the visuals and audio. Perhaps to its benefit, the limited roster of enemies has allowed the game to give them each some really nice animations and sprite work, which also extends to the playable trio. Sprites are colorful and detailed, and each of the scant enemy types are very distinct from each other, and bosses, and the trio especially, are animated very smoothly. The standout is the backgrounds, though. Each of the 8 stages takes place somewhere different, from the titular streets to a beach with a stunning skyline in the background to lengthily scrolling backgrounds on the ship and elevator stages. It's only the first game in the series, but it's still among the best best looking games on the system, rivaled only by other first-party Sega titles like Sonic and its own sequels. The music is also fucking incredible. It's very 80s. You got the Genesis's tinny sound chip pumping out fast, poppy, drummy beats covered in synth and oozing personality. It's got some crazy early techno feels and just feels really good. The boss theme especially is a standout that just bangs. The intro with the big siren and then the hi-hats tapping away through it just give the game so much fucking energy. And that energy is matched through a lot of the stage's themes, which all have their own songs. To say that the level design doesn't warrant mentioning very much would kind of be an understatement. Very few levels have any sort of gimmick. The 4th level, the bridge, has pits to fall into or throw enemies off of, as does the right side of the 7th, the freight elevator, which raises up the side of a building and stops at certain spots to facilitate combat. Meanwhile, the factory, level 6, has crushers that activate only when a player steps near them, making them dangerous weapons against opponents, as well as the player themselves, as well as conveyor belts that also only seem to affect the player, sadly. As for bosses, I don't know if they're all that interesting either, primarily because the dominant strategy before the final stage is to hit them with the super, smack the boss as much as you can before they kill you, and then use your super again when you respawn. At the default normal difficulty, I think it's fairly viable to use this strategy for 5 levels. I died right at the end of 5 on the bosses, and from there had to use level select and the extra lives code because this game is a fucking bitch near the end. I've seen people do it, and I'm sure with a lot of patience I could learn to beat it too, but this game is a bitch, and I can't even imagine it on hard. To quickly get up to where it becomes a mess, Antonio, the boss of the city street, has a boomerang but is fairly doable without supers because he's not very aggressive. Souther, the claw guy from Inner City, is a bit more aggressive but still leaves himself fairly open. Abadede, it's not a fucking name. The beachfront boss is also pushover, charging forward to attack, leaving himself open then repeating. Bongo on the bridge does a similar thing to Abadede, although his flames are longer range, making him a bit more difficult to navigate around. The ship level is where the bosses get terrible. Onihime and Yasha, a 2-on-1, where both bosses are just awful to fight. They never cooperate, they take nearly half your health with each attack, and whenever you attempt to attack, they backflip away. The most consistent strategy beyond super spamming is back attack spamming with the jump and punch button, which seems to fuck with their AI, albeit fairly inconsistently. The boss of the factory is 2 Southers. There's more of them? I thought that was just his name. Is it a title? Who's this guy? Northern? It's worth noting that Bare Knuckle Mobile and the Sega Master System both have unique bosses here made just for this stage, while on the Game Gear it's just Bongo again. I'm gonna guess that the little thing couldn't handle 2 Southers perhaps, although it worked with the girls, so I don't know. The freight elevator lacks a boss, and the final stage, the Syndicate headquarters, is basically a boss rush. But on this stage you can't use supers, so you have to fight them fair and square, or as fair as bosses who kill you in 3 hits can be. The girls especially are miserable, and it's basically a big fuck you life drainer. The final boss, Mr. X, offers the player the chance to join him, which is a fun touch. Accepting solo causes him to send you back to stage 6. In co-op, if one player accepts and the other denies, the players are forced to duel each other to the death, which is wasteful. And finally, denying his offer leads to a final boss fight. Outside of cheese speedrun strats, this is just a test of how many lives you have left. He shoots a machine gun at you, which hurts, but then just charges you so you can smack him around, and after he does this a couple times, you die, you respawn, and you just continue until one of you runs out of health. If you have enough lives, you win. If not, you're basically fucked. And with that, Mr. X is arrested and the city is saved. Streets of Rage is kind of weird. For as big a deal it was, its success was basically limited to the Genesis. 2 sequels there, a few brief side stories in Sonic the Comic, and a lot of nothing else. A Saturn game was pitched but fell through and became the somewhat obscure Fighting Force, and a Dreamcast entry was pitched and fell through entirely, and that was it until 2022 when Streets of Rage 4 came out, developed by a studio that licensed the franchise from Sega but largely without their involvement. It is pretty great though. A movie was announced in 2016 from the creators of Fear the Walking Dead. Jesus Christ. Oh my god. But as far as I know, that project is dead in the water. The production studio behind it made 1 movie in 2018, a music video in 2019, and a bunch of ads, without seemingly much more in the way of if or when their 14 fucking announced Sega movies will ever come about. 14? How do you announce 14 goddamn movies at once? Super Monkey Ball? Crazy Taxi? Streets of Rage had its time and is remembered fondly enough to get a revival that went over well, but not enough so that it's an enduring franchise. Perhaps in time we'll see another if Streets Streets of Rage 4 did well, and it does seem to be doing pretty well. It had pretty good sale charts and just released on mobile a couple weeks ago. Maybe that'll push them into doing a 5th game, but for now the series is something of an old relic with a lot of love that mostly comes from being included in every Genesis collection known to man. Streets of Rage is okay. I think the basic control's good, and the visuals, and especially the music, are fucking incredible. It's fun enough to play up until it becomes incredibly brutal right at the end, with the last bit being genuinely pretty miserable, especially the last stage. Co-op as a band-aid doesn't really change my mind either. I've played this game with people, and it's still incredibly difficult near the end, not to mention that the last stage just deprives you of your best tool, and the last couple bosses are, they're tough, to say the least. There's very little complexity to the game, meaning the sheen wears off pretty quickly as it goes. The jumping kick is pretty useless, the back kick is situational, and supers are limited. You're left with trying to slowly space yourself out to hit before you get hit, which works at first, but gets worse as the enemies get more and more complex. It's a solid basic beat 'em up, but no longer a shining example of the genre, especially living in the shadow of its sequels. All in all, it's a decent game, but not amazing.